Something else I've been thinking about lately is this idea that the most visually impressive weddings are automatically the most meaningful. And honestly, I don't think that's true. Welcome to a new episode of the Said Yes Magazine podcast. Today, I want to talk about something that feels incredibly relevant in the modern wedding world. Because over the last few years, weddings have evolved into something much bigger than a ceremony or a celebration. For many couples, especially for many women, and getting married has become an entire emotional and visual experience built around aesthetics, expectations, planning, social media, and last of all, performance.
She said yes.
Said yes?
Some of the most beautiful weddings I've ever seen were actually very intimate. Smaller guest lists, simpler details, less performance, more presence. Because at the end of the day, what people usually remember most isn't the table setting or the flower installation. They remember how they felt. They remember the energy in the room, the emotion, the connection, the atmosphere. And I think that's why we're seeing more couples move towards weddings that feel more personal and intentional rather than purely aesthetic. Of course, design matters, beauty matters, the visual experience absolutely matters. But when aesthetics become more important than the emotional experience, something starts to feel disconnected. And maybe that's the real conversation we should be having. Not whether weddings should be luxurious or simple, but whether they still feel authentic to the people experiencing them. Because elegance is not always about excess. Sometimes elegance is emotional presence, comfort, warmth, authenticity, and those things can never really be replicated through trends alone. I also want to talk about beauty, because honestly, I think it's one of the areas where modern brides experience the most pressure. The conversation around weddings today has become incredibly aesthetic focused. Perfect skin, perfect body, perfect makeup, perfect hair, perfect photos. And the reality is that so much of what we see online is heavily controlled. The lighting, the editing, the filters, the posing, the angles. But a real wedding is movement. It's crying, it's laughing, hugging people, dancing, being emotional, being nervous. And sometimes I wonder if brides today feel pressure to become someone slightly different for their wedding day. More polished, more glamorous, more bridal. Of course, wanting to feel beautiful on your wedding day is completely natural. But I also think there's something deeply meaningful about still feeling recognizable, about looking in the mirror and still seeing yourself. Because years from now, the most important thing probably won't be whether every detail looked trendy or flawless. It'll be whether the memories felt real, whether the photos captured authenticity instead of protection. It'll be whether the memories felt real, whether the photos captured authenticity instead of perfection. And I think that's something worth remembering in a culture that constantly tells women that they need to transform themselves for major life moments. Looking beautiful on your wedding day shouldn't mean becoming someone else. It should mean feeling fully like yourself. So one thing I've noticed more and more is that weddings today are no longer just weddings. They've become fully curated experiences. And while that can be absolutely beautiful, inspiring, and even meaningful, it can also become emotionally exhausting. Years ago, most of the attention was centered around the wedding day itself. Now, there's an entire narrative built around the engagement. The proposal, the engagement shoot, the bridal shower, the bachelorette trip, the rehearsal dinner, the wedding content, the social media moments, and sometimes it feels like every single part of the process needs to look perfect, almost as though the experience isn't complete unless it's visually documented. And I think that changes the emotional relationship people have with weddings. The aesthetic matters, but the experience stays with people much longer. So before we end today's episode, I want to leave you with this. If you're currently planning a wedding and feeling overwhelmed by whether it's expectations, timelines, opinions, social media, or perfection, you are not failing. And your wedding does not need to look like someone else's to be meaningful. At the end of the day, a wedding is not a performance. It's a personal celebration. And years from now, what will matter most probably won't be whether every single detail was flawless. It'll be whether you were actually present enough to experience it. Thank you so much for joining me on this episode of the Said Yes Magazine podcast, and I'll see you in the next episode.